This video is sponsored by DistroKid. Follow the VIP link in the description down below to get 7% off an already amazing price to distribute your music to the world. Here in Studio One, I've got a group of vocals. You can see them all in blue. Now, what I want to do is actually control the overall volume of these vocals using just one fader. And I could do that by using a bus. And what I do is select the first of these channels, hold Shift on my keyboard, select the last channel, right click, go down to add bus for selected channels, and the bus is created. And I can go ahead and adjust the overall volume of this vocal group using just this one fader. Let's give it a go.
So we played all these games.
So you could hear the volume going down and then up. Now, what's important to understand here is all of the audio from each of these vocal channels is being routed through to the bus. Now, what we can do then is use effects on that audio, or we could send it off to other buses or effects channels. So that's an important distinction from what I'm about to show you, which is using a VCA. So let's get rid of that bus. And again, I'm going to select the first of my vocal channels, hold Shift and select the last. I'm going to right click and this time go down to add VCA for selected channels. Now, VCAs are easy to spot because they have red caps on their faders, okay, so you can't miss them. I'm going to do the same thing again. I'm going to use the fader to control the overall volume, but look at what's happening differently.
So we played all these games yet.
Now, as you saw, not only did the VCA fader move, but all of the other faders for the other channels moved. And that's because VCAs are working in quite a different way. There's no actual audio being routed through to a VCA channel. Instead, it's acting as a kind of a remote control for the other faders. Do notice when we move it up and down, though, they do keep their relationship with each other. So the mix that you've created for your vocal group will stay intact, but it will just get quieter and louder. Now, because there's no audio being routed through to the VCA, then there's no opportunity to add effects or send it off to some other channel. And with that in mind, you may be thinking, well, what's the point in VCAs? If they have so much less features than a bus, then why would you bother to use them? Well, that's actually a difficult question to answer, but what I can tell you is I do make extensive use of VCAs in my project. So what I thought for this video is I would show you exactly how they work, how they differ from buses, and you can make up your own mind. Now, you may notice that I've got a couple of new channels here in my project. You can see them here in green, and they're here just temporarily to demonstrate something about the behavior of VCAs. So I'm going to go ahead again and create a VCA for my vocals in blue. I'll select the first one, hold Shift, then the last one, right click and go down to add VCA for selected channels. And my VCA appears all the way over here on the right hand side. Okay, now if I go ahead and create a VCA for these green guitar channels here, do the same thing, you can see that its VCA has also appeared all the way over here on the right. And that's got something to do with the way I have Studio One set up. I rather like having all of my types of channels, whether they're VCAs or buses, all grouped together on the right hand side. But you may not prefer that workflow. So let's go ahead and change that. We'll go over to the left here, click on the spanner, and then go down to this option, keep VCA channels to the right. We can uncheck that. Now, what will happen is, and I'll get rid of those VCA channels quickly, just select them and go down to remove. I'll create my VCA again, and you will see that it appears now next to the channels that I created it for, okay? Added to that, I can also drag it around to any position that I want to. So you may find that to be a better workflow for you, completely optional. Now, as well as being able to control the actual faders of the channels it's associated with, a VCA can also mute them all with one touch like that, or solo them all with one touch like that. I actually find that super useful. You could do this by using groups. I find that slightly more complex than quickly creating a VCA, which I also find to be a bit more visual. Let me know in the comments down below which you would prefer. Now, as well as doing that, we can also do things like add an icon. If you're in Studio One version 6 onwards, or was it 6.5? I'm not sure. You can also recolor it just like you can any other channel as well. And you can rename it, double click on its name and rename it. And I highly recommend that you do, because obviously VCA1 doesn't really mean much to you after a while. Now, related to that, how do we know which VCA these channels are connected to? Well, we can actually see that just down below the fader here. Can you see VCA1? So that is indicating which VCA this is connected to. And if we click on it, we can also change it to a VCA if we indeed had any more, or we can disconnect it. Now, if you're not seeing that, just go over to the left to the spanner icon here, click on that, and then go down to VCA connections and just make sure that is checked so that you can see that option. Now, I just want to mention something which is probably kind of obvious, but I may as well say it just to make sure we're all on the same page. When we created the VCA, we already had a mix with these existing faders, yeah? And as we saw, we move the VCA and they keep their relationship. But that doesn't mean that that mix is kind of baked in. We can still go ahead and make adjustments to some of these faders. So let's just grab this pair here. I'll drag them drastically down like so. And then as we move our VCA, that new relationship between the faders is maintained. As I said, that's probably fairly obvious, but worth understanding because it relates to the next really cool thing about VCAs, and that's the way they handle automation. So before I show you how VCAs work with automation, I just want to quickly create some automation on some of our vocal tracks. So I've selected a couple here. I'm going to go down and select an automation mode. Latch will be fine for this. I'm going to go ahead and play the track. Now I'm going to make some really drastic moves that I wouldn't do in real life for these vocals. I'm doing this so that we can easily visually see what's going on in just a moment. So I'll play the track and make some adjustments.
So we played it, all these games yet.
Okay, so there's our automation. I'll do it for another couple of channels down here. The same thing again. I'll just select latch and then make some adjustments.
So we played it, all these games.
Okay, so we've got some faders bouncing up and down there. And if I go up to the top here, click on this icon so I can see automation, you can actually see those volume changes just there in terms of the automation. Now I could go ahead, of course, if I don't want to make any more changes, and just change those to read, okay, so I don't accidentally destroy my good work there. So now that we've made those changes, I want to show you how the VCA is going to affect that. Do you remember earlier how we kept the relative mix even though we were adjusting the VCA? Well, we also keep the relative mix even when automation has occurred. So you can see now, if I adjust my VCA, I'll turn it down and we play the track again, you're going to see all those moves happening.
So we played it, all these games yet.
They're just a scaled down version of the same moves. Now, if I change my view to, let's go to large tracks here, and then we look at one of these tracks, you can see the green line here for the automation. But if you look really carefully, just below it, you can see this gray line. Now, this is what you would call the automation offset, okay? The green line is the original automation that we created, but the gray line is showing what it's actually going to be after the VCA fader has offset its values and therefore its automation. Now, there's some other cool things to do with automation and VCAs that you should know about. Now, my previous example was really useful because it means that once we've set up that fine automation for our vocal group, we can still adjust the overall output of that vocal group within our mix without having to redo that automation. But sometimes we may want to automate the overall output as well, and we can do that. If we go to our VCA channel here, I'm going to change it to latch, and I'm going to play our track. Let's see what happens.
Though we played it all these games, yet I will fall.
Okay, so we can see that a number of things have actually happened here. We have our VCA automation track. We can see that here. Now it's even affecting, you can see just above, static tracks which didn't have automation. You can see they still have that offset. But tracks where we have already got automation are also affected by that offset, or that automated offset from the VCA. It's a kind of a compound effect, if you like. So you may want to do that, for example, when you just want to make those vocals louder for a chorus and quieter for a verse. But again, you still may want to control the overall output in your mix. And you can do that by adding a VCA to your VCA. So just right click on your VCA, add VCA for a selected channel. And now we can turn everything up and down, as well as the automation of the VCA and the associated channels with that VCA. I'm confusing myself now. I hope you're understanding. That's very, very cool, because we've still got that overall control after the automation has been applied. But what if you want to kind of bake in that automation? Now, if you have commitment issues, you may want to skip this section, but there are times in life and in music production when committing is a really good idea. I'll let you decide when, and I'll just show you how. We have our automation, which was already created there. We also have some automation on our VCA channel. And what I'm going to do is right click on that channel, and then I'm going to go to Merge VCA Automation. I'll click on that. And at the top with our tracks up here, you can see these two tracks were actually previously static, but they were being offset by the VCA automation. So you can now see that that is baked into the track. And if we look further up here, where previously we could see some gray lines showing the offset, the grey lines have gone, and we have all of that now baked in. So that complete automation is now permanent. And you can see with all of our channels, they have changed to be read enabled for automation, and our actual VCA channel has its right information, or its automation, removed, and it's now gone back to 0, and it can be used again. So I just wanted to quickly demonstrate to you a difference in the behavior of VCAs and buses when we use them to control overall volume. Now in this example, I have my vocals as we've had before, but now I also have this effects channel, and this has a reverb plugin inserted to it. And you can see that all of my vocal channels have a send to that effects channel. In other words, all of my vocals now have reverb applied. Let's have a quick listen.
Though we played it.
And you can hear it on the tail of that phrase there. Now, significantly in this particular experiment, I have control over the volume of my vocals in two different ways. First of all, I have a bus here, which is adjusting the volume in the same way I demonstrated right at the beginning of the video. And then I have a VCA, which is doing the same thing. Okay, so let's start off with the bus. I'll select the bus, and I'll turn the vocals all the way down.
Though we played it all these.
And you can hear that although I've turned the main vocal signals all the way down to 0 with the fader, we can still hear the reverb, which is over here, okay? Now this is partly because this is a post-fader send. If we look up here at all of these vocals, you can see the send is in blue, meaning that we are actually sending the signal to the reverb over here after it's been affected by the fader. Now, because these faders themselves are not being turned down, there's still a signal going through to that reverb channel. You may have already guessed the difference with a VCA, but I'm going to demonstrate it anyway. Let's do the same thing and turn all the vocals down.
Though we played
Now, because the VCA works in a different way, it actually does turn the faders down for the individual channels. By the time we get it all the way down, it means that no signal is being sent through to that bus where we have our reverb. Now, that's an exaggerated example where we're turning something completely off, but it is worth remembering that what we would be doing when we actually use the fader with the bus is we'd be changing the relationship between the vocals and the reverb. So you may feel at times that your vocal has more reverb on it than you wanted, and that may be why. Okay, so it's just a difference in behavior. It's up to you which method you use. Don't forget, if you're releasing your music, follow that link in the description down below to our sponsor DistroKid. They normally charge $22.99 per year to distribute an unlimited number of original tracks, but if you follow that link, you'll get a further 7% off. Let me know in the comments down below how you feel about VCAs. Are you going to give them a try? Do you already use them? I'd love to hear from you on that. Now, if you want to understand routing in Studio One in general, then I highly recommend you watch this video right here.